All right, folks. Um, I have just been engaged in multiple conversations on multiple channels, randomly, groups and otherwise, about questions about pasture and preparing it for grazing sheep. And I realized that I haven't really gone over kind of an overview of the last several months as we are, into our second year now uh, of grazing these sheep. And I realize there's a lot that I need to share. That just it just needs to be laid out pretty clearly and hopefully concisely for you guys. So as you know, if you find this video later and there's something you need me to expand upon or whatever or clarify, just reach out to me, strongrootsresources at gmail.com, or drop a comment. I do keep an eye on the YouTube comments and make every effort to follow up with them. So I'm just going to kind of get to it. If I see your question, I'm actually going to start it this time. And when I'm done with my notes, so I don't go scatterbrained on you, I will address all those things. So as a background, so we are in East Tennessee in the valley in what is not really quite a temperate rainforest here, but we can have quite a bit of growth and things can get real, I guess we could say weedy real quick, but we can also get very dry, and we have had issues with drought these last few years. So we obtained these sheep through an agreement in it's like a land lease agreement in August. So we started them in August, and we are now in our first spring with these sheep. And this is what I've observed. When you look at rotational grazing models, you will come across something called the rule of thirds. This is something that Billy Bond from Permapastures Farm will discuss. Joel Salison will discuss this. Greg Judy. This is kind of the school of thought from the Stockman Grass Farmer magazine. And the rule of thirds is this. When you are grazing a space, it is time to move the animals when that space looks to be about 1/3 grazed, about 1/3 has manure on it, and the final third looks kind of trampled. We never want to leave animals in a space so long that they are forced to eat things that they really would rather not eat. And that just depends on the animal, and it depends on the environment, or that they are having to eat the earliest regrowth of a grass or another plant so that it is short. Because when they are eating something that is short, their chances of exposure to a parasite is much higher. So that is one aspect. Keep in mind the rule of thirds. And you have to figure out over time what this looks like on your land. I am just now starting to get a pretty good idea of what that is looking like. So I am prefacing this is my first spring with these sheep. I had them through the end of a very hot summer and then a pretty wild winter. And I've used them a lot of different ways. So we are seeing how they respond to all this new growth that we're having with a pretty wet and not overly warm spring so far. We've actually had really ideal weather for grass and forage growth. Another thing to keep in mind is that these hair sheep are more foragers than just grazers. They do not have to have just grass. They will eat the wildflowers, the things we would call the weeds, the wild lettuces, vetch, plantain, blackberry. They eat various ivies. They eat pretty prolifically, almost like a goat. In a lot of ways, in my opinion, they are even more useful than goats, because at least the sheep that I have currently will reach for stuff. They will stretch out their necks, and they are like currently where they are pulling poison ivy off of cedar trees and eating that. They are pulling winter creeper vine off cedar trees and eating that. So they will defoliate. They will strip leaves off of vines, much in the way that goats will. But they also graze grasses, which goats so much, generally speaking, don't. So I find them to be very versatile, with the added bonus of they generally do not test the fence, the electric fence, the way some goats will. Uh, so you need to leave them in a paddock long enough that they eat what they want, a little bit of what they're not so crazy about, but not too much of something that's less than ideal for them. Joel Salatin says that sheep, well, animals in general, animals, they always eat dessert first. So when I move them to a new paddock, I stay in there for a few minutes and I see, especially if there's kind of a difference in what's available to them from one paddock to another, depending upon what part of property they're on and what's been going on that part of the property. I like to see what they go for first. Right now, it's anything with flowers on it, the dandelion, the vetch, the sow thistle, things like that. It will be the most tender grass tips. It will be actually things like the poison ivy right now. They really like that poison ivy. Good for them. And they will hit all of that first. They will seek it out. You will see them move around, take a little bite here, take a little bite there, and they'll explore that entire paddock, regardless of how big or how small I've made it, looking for the tastiest stuff first. When they exhaust that, then they kind of switch to the stuff that provides nutrition, but maybe they're not so crazy about it. And we don't want to leave them so long that they are forced to eat something that is not good for them. Things that could even possibly be, poisonous or cause actual like nutrient deficiency issues if they would eat that. And that could be in our area something like wild cherry, anything with a whole lot of tannin in it, like various, tree crops like walnut or grasses that have already set a seed head. They generally will not eat something that has already set a seed head. So this is important to know. So when it comes to rotationally grazing sheep or any animal for that matter, you have got to be paying attention to this. This is one of those things where you have to be involved in the process. I think I've spoken quite a bit about the why we should rotationally graze, why it's regenerative for the land, why it makes sense. Because I'm sure you guys have driven past a place where there's, it's just perimeter fence. So the animals just go wherever. They just go wherever they want. They tend to go in a group because most animals like to stay in a group. And eventually what is left behind is the stuff with the actual least nutritional value because nothing has an opportunity to rest and recover. The other reason you want to keep your animals moving is parasite load. All animals carry parasites. I want to raise mine in a way where we are not dependent upon medications, which means I need to move them off of land that they've been on before any parasite that has come out in their poop has a chance to mature to the point where it can reinfect the animal. All of them carry a load. The idea is that the load is low and it doesn't make them sick. It's like us having an immune system. We need to be exposed to things from time to time to build immunity and to build some resilience in that system. But if we're constantly bombarded with it, eventually our immune system is going to get worn down. And we have dealt with parasites here and we have had issues. And we did make the choice to medicate once with the plan to not medicate again, make sure the rotational grazing is happening and see if we can basically beat it out. And it depends on the parasite. So this is something you need to look up and know. You need to look up what are the potential parasites that they may be exposed to, what their life cycle is, and make sure you are moving them before they can re-ingest at a time that parasite in its, like for instance, in its egg stage, if they ingest a parasite egg, then that parasite can become a problem within their system. So these are things you got to know. This is going to vary. This can be 18 days. This can be, it can be weeks. It really just depends. So you need to look it up. You need to know that. You need to try to keep your grass as tall as possible. And you also want to encourage the best forage for them. So this is kind of what I was helping to explain to some folks earlier. So what we are working on doing here is after the sheep have been in an area, and I can see what they've left behind. So that's going to be like the seed heads from a lot of the grasses where it's grown so fast, it set seed. It already had seed set before they moved in there. I wanted to leave the grass tall because I didn't want to risk parasite exposure. So I let them eat what they wanted, and then we will go behind, and depending upon the terrain and how tall and thick and whatever, we will either mow, weed eat, or bush hog as high as possible, to cut off the seed heads, hopefully immature seed heads, but that's not always the case. This is a process, guys. This takes time. But cut off the seed heads to reset that grass. I mean, you guys know it. You know about not mowing too low. If you mow too low, it's actually bad for your grass. It's bad for your yard. Same thing applies to pasture. So if you can do this with a weed eater, and it depends on how much acreage you're working with, but if you can do this with a weed eater, you can really control the height of what you're knocking down. You can reset that grass, and it has an opportunity to regrow and to create a better root system. Then we wind up with healthier soil. We wind up with more diversity, and everything improves. Another kind of clue into whether or not an area is ready to be regrazed is you look at the grass tips, or any of the other forage. If it has fully regrown its tip and it doesn't look bitten or chopped off, it is probably okay to return there if you are also beyond your parasite exposure timeline. So that could be, that could be a few weeks. I'm going to check my notes here real quick. Yes. So again, this is observation is everything in this process. This is why if you're going to be doing this, you need to be ready where you can either, depending on your budget and your time and all that kind of stuff, if you can go ahead and create either permanent paddocks. But I'm kind of from the school of Joel Salatin, and another one of some of the wisest advice that I've come across is before you create a permanent fence, use a temporary fence for a few years. He says up to 5 years. If after 5 years you still want the fence where that temporary fence has been, then you can put your fence up. I move mine entirely with step-in posts, which are just, the single white posts. They've got, I think it's 9 hooks. So you have 9 options for, it's 8 or 9, something like that, for where you secure your line. And then polywire, which is a nylon string with a bunch of conductive wire woven through it. It goes on a reel. You roll it out. You hook it on the post. When you need to take down a paddock, you crank it up. And everything goes to either a plug-in charger or a solar electric charger. Fencing and charging is kind of a whole other topic, so we can tackle that on another day. I mostly want to talk about what you do for your pastures. Now, a lot of people want to know about seeding, about either overseeding, what to seed, when to seed, and one of the people who was asking me this earlier, they've had land cleared, so the land is bare and it needs to be covered again. If you pull up, there's any number of them out there, but just get into one of your search engines and put in cover crop seeding, and you will get charts that will give you everything you need to know. When to seed it, how much per acre, what variety, things that you can blend, things that are going to return perennially like clovers, things that are going to grow and then just die back like a winter rye. And because sheep eat all of this stuff, you really can't go wrong. The only thing, if you are starting with, as it were, brand new land, cleared land, don't seed fescue. Just don't. There is kind of a, they can eat it, but it's not ideal. And Lord knows we've got it out here. We've got it all over the farm. But eventually I believe there's going to be other pasture grasses that are going to take that over. But there is a kind of a toxicity due to fescue that most ruminants struggle with, and it actually makes them less tolerant of the heat, and they can have heat related issues. That's why you probably want to consider agroforestry or silvopasture, which combines trees with pasture, so those animals have a way to cool themselves. Silvopasture, whole other ball of wax. I was suggesting this to this lady in the group because they've had land cleared. It sounded like they still had the opportunity to determine layout, to determine maybe earthworks or swales, and swales or a tree planting system. So if you're going to do all that and you're going to have the equipment, those are things you should sort out early on before you just start seeding things. Anytime you have bare land, as I'm sure you guys have observed before, the hardiest weedy things are the stuff to come in first. If you have the opportunity to jump ahead of that by seeding appropriately, things like clovers and vetch and buckwheat and all kinds of legumes, it's a long, long list. Like I said, look at the chart. The chart is still what I reference because I can't keep it all in my head. Then you could get ahead of the game on that. Seeding, in my opinion, it is probably better to seed if you're going to overseed in the southeast in the fall. We know the weather's going to cool down. We know we're going to have rain over the wintertime. If you don't have irrigation, I am not certain that it makes a whole lot of sense to seed once we start getting hot. I know it depends, and I also always say try not to leave soil bare. So there is that aspect. But I'm wary of the cost of seed, the cost to have it put in correctly, and still potentially have failure because we get so hot and we can get so dry. So that's something to take into consideration. Is what does your climate forecast look like? Okay, I think I've got my notes wrapped up. Like I said, I kind of put this together the last minute and didn't have a ton of thought behind it. So I'm going to check the comments here real quick. Thank you for dropping in, Digger. I appreciate that. I know I just kind of sprung this on you guys. Thomas is here. Thomas says we have pigs and are thinking of getting sheep. Thank you for the ice cream first advice. And you're welcome. When I first heard that from Joel, I mean, it just made so much sense. And I don't know why it hadn't occurred to me before. And keep in mind, I was reading Joel's books on these topics when I was still stuck in the city, just doing stuff on a 5th acre, playing with, chickens and quail. So I've had that locked into my head this whole time. And the first time I saw sheep get let out of that trailer onto our pasture, even though it was August and dry as could be, sure enough, they went for the tastiest, most tender things first. That bit of information alone can really get you ahead of the game. Chicken Duck, thank you for stopping in. You guys know if you come up with questions later, you guys know how to find me. The Telegram group is going great. If you need the invite link for that, let me just go ahead and drop it in here. I had to change it because the spam was coming in, but with the risk of more spammers showing up, here is the link. Here comes the link. For the Telegram group. We cover this kind of stuff pretty frequently. I believe I have it set up to where if you join, you can see all the previous stuff. So you can get in the search box, you can put in grazing, you can put in cover cropping, and you'll be able to see the previous discussions on all of that. As always, I'm always happy to email with you guys or schedule phone calls. If you just need something just kind of hashed out and I haven't covered it in a video, just holler at me. I'm happy to help. So, we are now middle of May, late May, and we've had good rain. We've had weather that hasn't been too hot. So the grass growth and the other forage growth has been really nice. And I've been really happy with it. I've been able to take the sheep through areas that when they were here at the end of summer were just almost burnt. But I needed to keep them moving across the land. And there were a few places where I had to start feeding hay early just because there wasn't a whole lot else for them to eat. Everything was just fried by August. I'm really hoping we don't get, that we don't have that kind of drought again. So just as a kind of a reminder, understand your rule of thirds. just get an idea of what that looks like to you. There may even be a way to kind of simulate it. Maybe throw your kids and make a little paddock, throw your kids out there and have them run around. Maybe don't have them poop in the yard. I mean, I don't know. It depends on if you're in the country or not, but just have them move around, have them just pull things up that look, good to them. It's funny. Uh, if there's a way to simulate this, it may help. But it's funny how now I think like a sheep. And when I prepare a new paddock and I go out there and I get all my gear and I'm starting to set stuff up for them, I'm in there and I'm looking, I'm like, oh yeah, they're going to hit that. They're going to love that. There's some clover. And it's really exciting when I see stuff that, that I haven't noticed before. Now there's areas that they're grazing that prior to that time, I didn't actually visit them a whole lot myself. I had still been kind of working real tight within my zone 1 and my zone 2. But at this point, I feel like I have pretty close eyes on 85% of my property, my 10 acres, and the other acreage, the adjacent acreage that, part of it is my brother's, part of it is mom and dad's. But we have areas where everybody said, hey, it's cool if the sheep graze here, move them on through when you're ready. And we just kind of figure out the logistics as we go with setting up chargers and if things need to be plugged in or whatever. So yeah, try to think like a sheep. Try to think about, man, if I was a ruminant, what would I want to eat first? And what would be least appealing to me? And what would I just kind of put up with when the ice cream is gone? Think about look at diagrams of how their mouths work, how their rumens work, um, their teeth and their hard palate and all that kind of stuff. Because one thing that we do have to watch for is while we have the sheep, we also have Primrose, the guardian donkey, and the way she eats is different. She will rip stuff from the ground, and she will eat grass with some seed heads on it. So if I see a bunch of seed heads stripped off, I know that was probably Prim, which is fine. It's good for her. But the sheep aren't crazy about it. So that's another factor. If you're using a guardian donkey, that's gonna change how things interact a little bit. So you guys let me know, just later on, if you've watched this, you have time to think about it, you need a little more information, if something just wasn't clear, you want to keep in mind, you want to keep them moving. In my opinion, it is better, and I have this, and this is from personal experience, it is better to move them sooner rather than later. It can get hard to fix if something's been overgrazed. Now, with good weather and stuff, things can get fixed. But I'll give you an example. I had the sheep in a paddock, real close to the cabin, real close to the house, when I was going to be out of town for a few days in October, and I was pretty sure that they had enough to eat. But there was this one particular area where they just overgrazed it. They just kept nipping everything down, right down to ground level, and that spot stayed unhappy and beat up looking right up and until this time of year, until it had enough rain and enough recovery time for that stuff to really regrow again. So you can, it is better to try to be a little ahead of the game and leave behind things that still look good. That's okay, because then that plant has a chance to set a deeper root to create more foliage, because it's not as it's rested, it's recovered, versus it's been beat down and it needs more time and more energy to recover. Digger is asking thoughts on using sheep as mowers for a 2-acre yard. Buy lambs in spring and butcher in fall. You could probably pull it off with no more than 2 or 3. If that is something that makes financial sense for you and you have the time to be able to move them around. But even on 2 acres, like I would probably set that up as 1/4 acre paddocks. I think you could probably pull off a rotation off of that and have decent regrowth. if your weather cooperates and all that good stuff. Um, I'm a big fan of try it and see what happens. We are not going to. A lot of people in the regenerative movement, sometimes some of us get a little too obsessive about quote messing up, because we don't want to mess up, because we're trying to fix things, right? We're trying not to be ignorant. We're trying to find the smartest and most efficient way to do things. But I have made errors too, guys. I made errors in, like I was just talking about, leaving them too long. I thought they were going to have enough to eat, and they didn't, and things got overgrazed, and things needed more time to recover. But landscapes are also really resilient. We've seen how things can heal themselves when there have been heavy machinery on it, and how quickly weeds and stuff will come back in to cover the soil. So uh, it's definitely going to recover from the sheep, because even if a spot has been overgrazed, it's still received the benefit of their urine, of their manure, of their trampling action, creating little pockets where more water seeps in. So I say it won't hurt. It won't hurt to try. Be prepared to move them. Kind of have an idea of how long it takes you to do that. For me, on average, it takes about an hour to an hour and a half to set up approximately a quarter-acre paddock. My paddocks, the size of them always vary by a little bit, because it depends on where I'm moving them across the landscape. Sometimes I have to put them in wider spaces. Sometimes I have to go narrow spaces. Sometimes I'm fencing around various things or fencing them out of certain things. So it can vary. But on average, each paddock is about an hour and a half of work to set up the post, run the line, move the charger, move their water and their mineral. And it just kind of depends on how fast I'm moving that day. And sometimes I'm doing that with everything being pushed around in a wheelbarrow. But lately I've gotten my little John Deere lawn tractor with a little trailer, and that has helped, and that has streamlined things a little bit. If you have somebody who can help you, who can set posts, and you follow behind and run the line or something like that, there's lots of ways to tag team that kind of stuff. This is a great job for little kids to help out with. You teach your son or daughter how to run that reel, they'll probably like it. You could really create some quality time with your kids doing this stuff. The step-in post, there's varying qualities. If your soil is real rocky like ours, sometimes they can be in a pain in the butt. And when we get real hot and dry, there's times where I have to use a mallet to knock them in. Sometimes I can just step on them and they just go right into the ground. It's been pretty nice this spring with the amount of rain that we've had, but that is a variable. So yeah, I suggest you try it. And if you have thoughts, if you want to send me photos or maps and stuff and help me, help you sort that out at some point, you guys, I'm happy to do it. This is kind of my thing. I get a lot of enjoyment out of helping people sort this stuff out. Josh is asking or saying, I would guess it would also depend on soil quality. Mine wasn't great and they overgrazed pretty fast, but this spring it's coming back pretty well. And that's true. And you got to remember, your soil quality is going to improve with their action, even if their action happened a little longer than you wanted it to. It's not going to be the end of the world. But yeah, here we're on limestone, bunch of chert rock, and red clay, and not a whole lot of topsoil in a lot of places. Certain areas of the property have better soil, but a lot of it's been pretty rough. So that's one of the big reasons behind why I'm doing the sheep and why I'm doing sheep and not other animals. And if you really want to jumpstart things after you have grazed them and you have knocked back the things that they're not crazy about eating, if you want to apply your compost teas, which, make sure those are made right, make sure they're not anaerobic, make sure they've gone through like an aeration process, or compost extract, or even just straight up finished compost. If you've got a way to spread it, if you've got a way to spread their manure, I made a drag from a piece of cattle panel that's got like the more like, I guess, like the 3x3 squares on it. I made a drag out of that panel, nailed some, screwed together some 2x4s to kind of weigh it down, hold it against the ground. And I can pull that around, and that'll kind of break up, especially primroses, giant donkey dukes, and all that action gets into the soil quicker. So there's pretty relatively low labor ways of rebuilding that soil as you work the animals across it. So that's definitely a factor. So I think that's what I got for you guys right now. I hope that was helpful. I hope that was pretty clear. It's one of those things where I really have to say, well, it depends. And if somebody really needs help creating a grazing plan, I pretty much have to see the land to help them do that because it's just there's just a lot of variables, and a lot of it is what grows, how fast it grows, what your weather's like, how the water moves, what your soil's like. Of course, I didn't really talk about stocking density of animals, but now that we have all these lambs and my numbers have pretty much doubled, that's another thing too. I'm making bigger paddocks, but moving just as often because our numbers have gone up. So you do have to kind of figure out your stocking density as well, and it depends. So yeah, guys, Digger, you're welcome. Thank you guys so much for popping in here for a last minute Q&A. And if you guys catch us in the future, holler at me, grab the Telegram group, or email me at strongrootsresources@gmail.com, and I'm glad to help you guys suss out these kind of questions. And otherwise, y'all have a good weekend and take it easy.